Did you get my email?
Is there one that they showed up?
Huh?
Is there one that they showed up or the about email?
Nobody in this area.
Right.
I sent one right before I left work. You know, I work in Port Huron, so 5 o'clock. I have a new fun thing where here at my website, johngirdwood.com/stream, to make it as easy as possible to remember, there it is. Woo. It's a little delayed. A lot delayed, maybe? Whoa. Okay. Yeah. So I figured for everyone that couldn't make it tonight, they could stream it. I think I could probably see how many people were watching it. Let me see. I don't know if it says, but I could probably figure it out. Any guesses? 0. My girlfriend watched the last one. It's 1. But I think that's cool. Each semester I've taken steps forward trying to make the whole experience better for you. My first semester had some guest lecturers. I had Sylvia Crawford guest lecture. She's a mother of NBA player. The NBA player who's famous for dunking on LeBron James in a summer league game. Her sons are from Detroit. She's from Detroit. I had, my next semester, I had Michael Moore Skype in. And this semester, I videotaped my lectures to put on YouTube in case anyone couldn't make it. And halfway through, figure out how to stream it. So, making progress. Wonderful. Had some great ideas. I get excited about this stuff, so I had some great ideas for next semester about what I want to do. But there it is. Here for the world to see. I don't know how good the clarity is, but I guess the sound is okay. Okay, so I gotta switch off this website so I won't break the space-time continuum when I put this around here. Let's see. I think actually back farther. It worked pretty well. This is only the second time I've done it. Okay, so two things to start off with tonight, not to be a downer, and then we'll get to the material, the content of the lesson for tonight. But I had quite a few incidents this semester in all of my classes of plagiarism, and what that does is it bums me out, and it creates a lot of extra work, which is unfortunate, and a lot of extra work. So I just wanted to remind you the guidelines and the consequences and the processes for plagiarism. There is a wide variety of instances or types of plagiarism that stray from completely unintentional, an uneducated student who does not know what they're doing, to completely intentional, a student who knows exactly what they're doing and submits a fully copied paper. So this would be the gamut. And so because there is such a wide gamut and wide variety, we have to approach it with our best judgment. I don't like to be a judge. One of the reasons I dropped out of law school is because I don't like to judge things. But it's always fair, obviously. And in one of my classes this semester, I had a student copy an abstract and paste it and turn it in as one of the pages of the midterm. The entire page was the abstract. It's quite easy to see that. And I had a discussion with that student who didn't know what they were doing. And so we moved forward, and student resubmitted the work and revised it, and that was good. That tends to be what happens. At SVSU, there are two main paths for plagiarism. One is an informal, which is much like that. Talk with me tonight after class. Revise the work, resubmit it. If you were, I don't want to say caught plagiarizing because that's a negative connotation, but if you plagiarize, then you got a 0, work on it, resubmit. That's informal. And that's after an explanation or a conversation about what occurred, and then that's informal. There's also formal, which is a hearing before some board or whatever. And then you can either admit or deny guilt. I've never had it reach that far, so I would assume that the student would admit because it's copying and pasting, but they could deny. In fact, at Michigan State, I sat on one of these boards, in which case a student denied guilt. It was the exact same paragraph. It was very hard to look at that and figure out what's going through the student's mind in denying that occurrence, but so be it. You have your option now. There are some guidelines for you here at the SVSU website, and I think it tells you the process as well. But here, I'll just pick two of these right here, these first two bullet points, which are very important to focus on. To provide clear attribution of outside sources with parenthetical citations, lead-in or signal phrase, or a combination of both. That's one. Number two, follow all quotations, paraphrases, and summaries of outside sources with appropriate and complete parenthetical citations. So based on those two things, what's very important with plagiarism, especially the unintentional kind, is to acquaint yourself very much with APA format. So if you know what a proper APA format is, you would have no problem, because as I believe I've indicated in prior classes, if you copy and paste something and you throw some quotation marks around it, then you put the source afterwards, like in the case where the student that copied and pasted the entire abstract, had that student put quotation marks around it and put the source at the end, it's not technically plagiarism, it's just bad form. But in that case, there were no quotation marks, and so that was problematic. So again, it's a wide gamut. I hate to bring it up as a downer, but I've had several instances this semester, and the main result is just extra work. And you know I don't like to do extra work, and also I don't like to be a bummer. So let's just try to work on not doing that. And for those students who need to talk to me about getting a 0, I guess, segueing, one thing to keep in mind, I do not like to be the police. I'm a pacifist. I don't like to call people out on anything. I really don't like it. I'm not accusing. What we're doing is we're working for it. My main objective, I think more than any teacher that you may even have on this campus, I might even challenge that, is to get you to a good place. And so if we were having a conversation about a mistake, this is not an accusation of wrongdoing. Because if I were accusing you, I would just throw you to the formal, say, good luck at the board, here's my evidence, you know, go that route. But I have to stress that because I do get a lot of emails. I don't think students understand who I am, where I'm coming from. Perhaps the students aren't listening to my point of view, but I get a lot of emails. It's like, I'll show you, and I'm going to prove this, and I'm like, you don't have to prove anything. We're just going to sit here and talk about your paper and then come up with a good resolution. So I think it's very critical to focus on good resolutions and positive outcomes for the entire class, including instances of mistakes. So we'll end it there and just continue to focus on moving forward with good intentions. Now, another bummer note, I guess, right? But it gets better. Remember the syllabus? Here we were talking about preparation and participation. This is more of an issue with my other class on Wednesday, and I'm a little concerned about this pocket of students here. But participation is very important. It's 15% of your total grade. What we have here that were given out, I think 2 weeks ago. Yeah, 2 weeks ago would be not this, but this, the checklist. And so it's given out 2 weeks ago. We have 5 check boxes to keep an accurate assessment of your progress. And so if you participate in the exercises, check the boxes and turn it in up here. As I pull off the top one and I look and I say, okay, this student has participated in both exercises but didn't go to the writing center, but that's okay. Nice that they went to 2 exercises. Work back. Let's see. I'm sure if it went black for a minute, they all clicked out of their browsers and said, "Oh, technical difficulties." Let's see. How does it feel to be part of the guinea pig group? Oh, look, I think we're back on. Now, to the meat of the week. Anyone have great aspirations of presenting tonight? No? I kind of assumed that we were all done, but I haven't really been keeping track, so assuming we're done. If we can go next week. you don't want to get rotten apples thrown at you because of presenting so close to Thanksgiving. Or present to no one as everyone leaves their break, like I do on Wednesdays. I hope none of my Wednesday class is watching that. I'm sure they're not. Anyways. Yeah. Oh, Craig is. He's watching. Yeah. Oh my gosh. What am I going to do with Wednesday, Craig? What's that? Not this Wednesday.
Next Wednesday?
No, this Wednesday will be very representative of the normal attendance. Probably be better, actually. So, anyways, back to the topic. So, what I drew up on the board at one point, I think it was 3 weeks ago, was a bunch of rectangles, very useful for you, for those who are visual learners like myself. And what you had in the triangles was a cover page, rectangles, introduction. I'm sorry, I did this yesterday too. Abstract, right. Introduction. It was about 1.5 pages, then a lit review. It's about 3.5 pages. Methods, sample, data and results, some discussion maybe some comparison to your prior lit, conclusion, bibliography, any appendix, which is not a requirement, but it's nice if you do something like a survey, you want to include your survey instrument. I've already been talking with some of the students in here about survey instruments, which is great. And you can put your survey instrument in the appendix. You want to include a couple of your survey questions or the intent or the formation of your survey questions in your method section. That's great, but I don't want your actual survey in the method section. That's just a waste of space, redundant, and not very synthesized, so you put that in your abstract. If we were going to number these pages, this would be 1, 2, 3. This would be on, let's see, 4 through 7. Methods would be 8, sample would be 9, data results 10, discussion and comparison would be part of 10, so I call this 10.5. Conclusion is about page 11. Your bibliography is 12, so that's a 10, 12-page paper, and then your appendix would be anything more than that. So what's kind of cool in this timing of this class, in the semester, is we're right here, and we're going to learn sample tonight. And that's really great because you worked hard on your literature review, and you learned this through the midterm, although it's going to take some edits and some revisions. I believe I posted a link on VSpace. If I did not, just let me know. I can post it. How to write a literature review. I forget what school puts it out. But it basically tells you how to write a literature review. Kind of like I gave you the purple PDF that said how to review an article for the midterm. I said, here's the purple PDF. Here's how to do it. A lot of you used it, and some of you got really good grades, and that was awesome. So with the literature review, I've given you a link to how to do a literature review. So you're just going to read that and do one. It's a way to synthesize or reconvert, or just convert, not reconvert, your midterm into a literature review. So try to do that at least by now or over the weekend. You should have an introduction done. You should be able to write an abstract. I've actually posted a link called How to Write an Abstract. If I have not, sometimes I get my classes mixed up, let me know and I'll post it immediately to the announcements. So how to write an abstract, how to write a literature review are up there. Introduction, I mean just read the sample final paper that's already up there. Cover page, that's easy. I'll tell you exactly what I want on it. Either next week or in 2 weeks. It's just a couple lines. It's pretty easy. Methods we learned how to do last week. We actually did an exercise on writing methods. You should have actually written your method last week. This week we're going to learn sample, which means this weekend you should have 9 pages written of your final project. That's where we're at. And what you do, a lot of students do this. Like, some of you are going to hear this and you're going to say, Girdwood's crazy. Nobody does that. Oh no, I talk with a lot of students and they're doing this. They're making plans to talk with their family, to call relatives in California, to pass out surveys, to do interviews. One of my students is going to go to the mall this weekend and do all kinds of stuff at the mall. Another one of my students is watching concerts as an ethnography, and that student has actually already done some of that method, but might do some this weekend. So that would be data collection, in which case next week we're going to come together and we're going to talk about the data that you've assembled and accumulated and any results that you may be thinking about. So your data and results don't have to be written by next week, but you'll have your data if you're doing an article, if you're doing active research, if you're performing a method. This is the point in the semester, actually, we're a week past methods, but we're going to talk about sample tonight, which is sort of contingent on a method and vice versa. So obviously you need to know how to define who you're talking about and what you're doing. And that at this weekend you could go do it. Then next week you could talk about your data and results. And then 2 weeks from now, we're printing off our papers, bringing them into class, and showing them off and talking about them. That leaves the first week of December to just hang out, talk about our papers, but think about the time frame right now as you transition into the weekend. You should have 9 pages written by now. I think very few of you probably do. You should do your method this week if you're doing an article. Some students actually are. Don't think that I'm just making that up. Next week you should have your data, or at least your expected data if you're going to do a proposal. Then the following week we talk about our papers, completed and printed up. In 2 weeks you should have your paper done. So just kind of think about that. And then, right? So next week we talk about data and results that you found over this weekend. 2 weeks you print off your paper, bring it in. At this point, after tonight, you should have 9 pages written, actually. So that's where we're at. I hope I don't scare you. It was actually really good last night. And when I talk about last night, that's my class at Delta. It's a great group of students. They're working really hard. We've lost some who just stopped coming to class, but for those who stayed, which proportionally is kind of like this, they're doing really well and progressing very, very well. And like, it says a lot about a student who turns in a midterm with all websites as sources, and I come back and I say that's not good or acceptable. And some students just go, whatever, and then they continue to do it, or they drop the class. And other students, like the student that emailed me today, said, here are my sources, and I replied, these are websites, and then we're going to talk about how to get actual scholarly academic journal articles, and that student's going to move forward. So it really says a lot about a student that will work through some very difficult processes, especially for the first-year student. And it's very impressive. A really good group of students. This group is also good. No comments about Wednesday. Sampling. This is a lecture. Skittles up here because most professors who do an activity with sampling will use Skittles. They'll put Skittles, this is just a very basic idea of what they might do. They'll put Skittles into a big gallon jug. Skittles have yellow, green, purple, red, orange, whatever. So in the big gallon jug, there's probably 1,000 Skittles. Have students reach in, pull out a handful of Skittles, and then they count them out. So you might have 3 yellow, 4 green, 5 red, whatever. So you might have 5%, 10% red, 11% yellow, 12% are green, 11% are purple, and 10% are blue, or whatever Skittles are. And then they count the entire jar, and then they see that's very representative. Each person's handful is representative of the entirety of the jar. And so that's what sample is. It's a pretty basic concept, and so you just need to get a little bit more detail, because the thing about college is if you come in and you already know everything, you shouldn't even be here. You should never took the class. So sampling, I think you get the idea of the Skittles exercise or activity, which is why I don't do it. Because I think you understand that if you're going to do research and you can't reach out to all 1,000 people, in other words, you can't interview 1,000 people this semester, you can only have time for 10, you got to pick out 10 really good ones. And so in the case of the Skittles, you're not going to pick out 10 yellow ones. You're going to pick out one of each color. And that's a good
analogy to if you were studying something based on race. If you were studying race and you wanted to look at a certain set of races, you wouldn't just interview all white people, some white, some black, some Mexican, etc. So your sample needs to be representative of your population, and that's going to be expressed through the slideshow, but not just that point. Some very scientific ways and some next level collegiate scholarly academic ways to talk about your sample. I take from two websites, UC Davis and a Columbia website. Columbia's an Ivy League school. As I've showed you, a Yale lecture, maybe a Duke lecture, depending on what week we were talking about. I think it's important to go use this Ivy League material and get to that next level. You know, pretend like we're actually at one of those schools. It's good stuff. Why sample? It's a little punny here with P. Diddy, who is the king of sampling. Why sample? Because you can't observe everything. Like I said previously, you can't interview 1,000 people this semester. You can't reach out to every single person in America. I study international basketball. There's no possible way I can talk to every international basketball player. It's impossible. So you can't observe everything. So you need a sample that is representative of the population you are studying. If you're doing a study about America, your population is America. If you're doing a study about college students, your population would be college students in America, perhaps. And then your sample would need to be representative of that. So if you're talking about college students, you would not go to the mall and interview people who are not college students. If you're doing a study about American college students and you interview only people at Saginaw Valley, that would not be representative of all of American college students, because there are Ivy League community college, there are students that are not in the Midwest, there are private schools, there are public schools, there are Catholic schools, there are all girls, all boys, etc. So you need to make sure that your sample is representative of the population. So if you can't do active research on a representative sample, you can either turn your paper into a proposal or just talk about your limitations, which limitations come into play around this 10 and a half page, whatever. What makes a good sample? It's not just diversity that makes a good sample, because if you are going to a school and you say you went to BYU or something like that, and maybe the population of their student body is 5% African American and 2% Asian, and if you went there and you interviewed like 20 people and 8 of those people were black and 9 of those people were Asian, that would not be representative. So you don't have to focus on diversity, or if like 0.00001% is Indian, or Pakistani, and you were interviewing 10 people, it wouldn't be necessary to interview a Pakistani, because that's such a small proportion of the population that your sample, 10% Pakistani sample, 1 out of 10 interviews, would not be representative of the population. So it has to be representative, and it has to focus on the characteristics that you're studying. So if you're passing out surveys, or if you're doing interviews, and you are talking about income level and education, if those are your basic variables and elements that you're talking about, income level and education, and you're passing out a survey, don't put what is your race on the survey. Okay? I've talked to actually a student here that's doing a survey and has race as one of the questions, and I didn't get to this point, I don't think, in our email exchange, which was, if your study is not about race or has nothing to do with race, you don't even have to put the race question on your survey. It just doesn't even belong there. Just leave it out. Like you think about a religion. So if I'm doing one of my studies that I always do about race and sports and occupations and international basketball, I wouldn't ask them for their religion, because I'm not doing a paper on religion. So you only would observe characteristics that you're studying, and in that case you would only base your sample on characteristics that you're studying. So if you were doing a study that had nothing to do with religion, and you went to Michigan State and you wanted to interview people, and it just so happens that 80% of the people you interviewed were Jewish, but you're doing a paper about sports and gender, like it wouldn't even matter if 80% of them were Jewish. If they all had the characteristics that you're studying, that's an okay sample. And by okay, I mean representative of the population. So again, if your study includes variables like race, gender, and income, those characteristics need to be represented by your sample. If your study does not include those variables, then you don't have to include those. So just make sure that yours matches the characteristics that you're studying. We have two broad categories and then one subcategory that I focus on, although I included a couple other subcategories, but one I just focus on because it's so common, and that's convenience sampling. And convenience sampling falls under the category of non-probability sampling. So your two extremely broad, you can see just in the wording of what they're called, probability sampling and non-probability sampling. These are the two basic categories of sampling. And then we'll talk a little bit more in depth on convenience sampling, which is non-probability sampling subcategory, because many of you will do convenience sampling. So one of the main categories, probability sampling, this from UC Davis, is when all elements or units of analysis, individuals, persons, households, cities, churches, social clubs, if you're doing a case study, games or concert events, any element in the population is going to have some opportunity of being included in the sample, and the mathematical probability that any one of them will be selected can be calculated. So can be calculated kind of throws you off the scent, actually, because I almost want to end this with the probability of any one of them will be selected would be equal. It doesn't necessarily have to be equal. In other words, if you go to the mall, you don't need the probability that any person's going to be white or black to be like 50-50. It just has to be a calculated probability. And I don't teach statistics. I actually never have. And I don't really ingrain it into my class. So I'm not going to talk too much about the calculation. I would encourage you, if you're a quantitative researcher, to go and just study that further, outside of class. But just to take from this, all the elements have the same opportunity to be included in the sample, and the mathematical probability, this is the quantitative part, of any one of them being selected can be calculated. Okay, the United States Census is probably a good example of this, because they try to pass the United States Census out to everybody. So everybody seems to have the same mathematical probability of being selected, which can be calculated. And here's one way that we could calculate that probability, okay? How is the United States Census distributed? Through the mail? I think you're right, okay? I'm not a census person myself. I think people go knocking door to door too, right? Mail and door to door. So how could the United States Census miss somebody? Who might they miss? Homeless people, right. Now let's think about second level thought, because that's the right answer, homeless people, because the United States Census kind of goes out to people in their homes. Or maybe homeless shelters, but if people are living out in the woods in a tent somewhere, I'll miss them. And people on vacation. So the census might miss homeless people, but what is another potential second level descriptor of homeless people? Who are homeless people? Like, what of the socioeconomic status variables that we talked about could be used to describe homeless people? What's that? Poor people, right. So the census might not get to all of the poor people in the country. Poor people being synonymous, perhaps, with homeless people. So somebody in an office somewhere is going to have to calculate the number of homeless people. And when they come up with census data, they'll then do some more calculations about how many people are actually homeless, what their income levels are, what race they are, and all the potential answers for questions on the census. So the census appears good. You know, our thoughts are that it hits everybody, but there's a huge population or a huge portion of this population, in other words, the sample, that it doesn't reach. Now, another example of perhaps poor sampling that I talk about generally is especially relevant now in the presidential election cycle, although we've already concluded that. The polling, the pre-election polling, and the same kind of thing is true with Nielsen TV ratings. So when they're doing polls for the presidential election, what is an extremely common, perhaps the most common way to take a poll of voting tendencies? It's a very common way to do that. Have you ever heard of robocalling? When they're taking polls for the general election, they're reporting data. Did they ever come into our class? No. What do they usually do? How do they usually get their data? Call people? Right. And who do they call? Have any one of you ever been called on your cell phone? No. Who are they calling? Landlines. And who has landlines? Old people. So when they're reporting this data of, oh, we placed 50,000 calls across America, and we came up with the fact that, the results that 75% of America is going to vote for Romney. Who are they really talking about? Old people watching Jeopardy at 7 o'clock, eating mashed potatoes and gravy and stuff like that. And not only are they old people, but they live in houses with the landline, obviously, and perhaps they're on fixed income, but perhaps they have enough money to pay for the phone, so they're not in incredible poverty. So they've actually defined their sample by their method. And, you know, that's important to think about because there's one approach to writing the sample section in your paper is just to describe who you're talking about. I did a survey, and I interviewed 20 people, so my survey went out to 100 people, and 30 of them were black, and 60 were white, 5 were Hindu, and 5 were Muslim. You know, like, that's descriptive, and we've talked since the beginning of class how we need to move past description and into scientific thought. And so to go past just the description of the sample and go into the explanation of why your sample is more valid and has more confidence than a different sample, that's the second level. That's where we need to get to through these slides. So when we talk about the census, you know, it's one way to just talk about the census. Oh, it was mailed out, great. They hit a bunch of people, wonderful. They mailed like 1 million, so I'm sure it was awesome. No, that's pretty weak explanation. But if you start to think about, you know, I mailed out surveys, so kind of obviously, but don't say obviously, it kind of implied that I missed a lot of homeless people, and homeless people tend to be poor, so I probably missed a big segment of the population that was poor. So you go to that second and third level, you'll do very well on your sample section. Within probability sampling is a simple random sample for which all elements in the sampling frame have an equal chance of selection. Sampling is done in a single stage with each element selected independently rather than, for example, in clusters. Now, I'm not like an expert on sampling, and it's kind of a good coincidence that this lecture falls on the day before the Thanksgiving break because, you know, this is not my strongest point, sampling. So when I was talking about this yesterday, I actually kind of fudged this up, and it was nice because we went to the next slide, and because students in my Monday class pay attention, a student over in this area kind of actually gave me a better example of this than the one that I did, which was kind of junky last night, so I'm glad I wasn't recording. But it reminded me of the student who called me on getting the APA formatting wrong over email, which was nice. I like that. I like it when students are paying attention. And I go to the slide, students are like, oh, Gerber, you got it wrong. Here's a better example. Here's a better example. I don't even remember my bad example. Was names in a hat. Okay? So you've got names in a hat. Every name has this it's one card per person, and it's all in a hat. So in that case, every name has an equal chance of selection, and the sampling is done in a single stage, which is like the hand reaching into the hat, and each element is selected independently. In other words, I don't reach into a hat and grab out 5 and then take out of those 5 and pick out 1. So I'm not doing it in stages. I just have everybody's card into a hat, and I reach in sort of once, pull out 1, put it over, reach in another, maybe do that 10 times. So that's where, again, each one has an equal chance of selection, and the sampling is done in a single stage, and each element is selected independently. And that student gave me that example. I really liked it. I was very thankful, because whatever I said was junk. We moved forward. I figured out that what I said was junk because I went to this one, and then I was like, wait a minute. Because whatever I said last night on the previous slide was actually this, which is simple random sampling example. Suppose your sampling frame is a large city's telephone book that has 2 million entries, okay? This is what the phone call survey thinks. To take a simple random sampling, you need to associate each entry with a number and choose 200 numbers from 2 million. And here's an important thing to note if you're using variables to describe your sample and population. You use a big N for your population, small n for your sample. So again, the phone book has the population of 2 million. Perhaps it's Detroit in the 1970s. Now they have less than 1 million. And we're going to sample 200. So it would be very difficult to do this. And so you need to develop a system that's going to be random. Okay, you don't just start ripping pages out of the phone book. So what you're going to do is you're going to start between 1 and 20,000, which is 2 million divided by 200. And then you're going to take every 20,000th name. So that is a simple random sample. So in other words, you're not going to accidentally take 2 Joneses or 2 Smiths or 3 Mohammeds. You're going to go every 20,000th name, and this is a systematic sampling technique. Simple random sampling. You have a phone book, 2 million, and you want to think, how am I going to get 200 random respondents? How am I going to do that? See if this makes sense mathematically. 2 million divided by 200 is 20,000. So I'm going to take every 20,000th name. If I do that, 2 million, that will give me 200 respondents. So another way to look at this. If I had 100 people in my population and I wanted to get out 10 randomly, then I would do every 10th person. That's 100 divided by 10 would give me every 10th person. So it's kind of hard to understand this with the numbers if you're not a great mathematician. I didn't really get it too much last night, but I was like, now I get it. 20,000, because you're doing every 20,000 person, and you get the number 20,000 by 2 million divided by 200, which is population divided by sample size, which is every 20,000 person. Simple random sample. Tongue twister. Another subcategory of probability sampling is systematic samples, which are drawn by starting at a randomly selected element in the sampling frame and then taking every nth element starting from a random location in the telephone book and then taking every 100th name. So that wouldn't be starting on 1 and doing every 20,000th name. It would be starting on a random number, say 789, and taking every 100th name. So it's very close to the prior slide. I think the prior slide was one from Columbia, and this is the one from UC Davis. So these basically are talking about very close to the same thing. UC Davis is referring to it as systematic sampling, as probability sampling, and this Columbia site was calling it simple random sampling. But essentially they're talking about the same thing with one difference. The blue slide says start with number 1, proceed every nth number. This says start with a random location and proceed with every nth number. Systematic sampling, again, you have a list of 10,000 people and you want to sample 1,000. So this process is 3 steps. So if you want to do this, you can go back to these slides and proceed through these 3 steps. Talk about how you proceeded through the 3 steps in your paper. You probably have a stronger paper. You divide the number of cases in the population by the desired sample size. It's the same thing we did with the 2,200,000 thing. So 10,000 divided by 1,000 equals 10. So then you select a random number between 1 and the value in step 1, which is 10, and that would be, in this example, 7. So we start with 7, and then we take every 10th number after that. So again, this is talking about doing what was on the prior slide, just showing you a different way so you can perhaps understand it if you didn't on the prior slide. Again, the population, 10,000, sample is 1,000, start with a random number, 7, which is between 1 and 10, which is 10,000 divided by 1,000, and then go every 10th person. That's going to give us a sample of 1,000. A systematic sample of a population of 10,000. So in this case, capital N would be 10,000 and lowercase n would be 1,000. Population is 10,000, sample is 1,000. Cluster sampling. I really like the next slide because it kind of shows what it means to cluster sample. And that's where you select a sample in stages. First selecting groups of elements or clusters. Example being city blocks, or you might say congressional districts or school districts, and then selecting individual elements from each cluster. So this is great because if you wanted to go into each state, grab one county out of each state, grab one school district out of each county, grab one block out of each school district, grab one house out of every block, and grab one family out of every house, which would kind of be the same, potentially, unless it was an apartment building. And this is cluster sampling, and I think it gives you a good idea because instead of just going, this is where you're going to get confidence and validity out of your study, is if you do something like cluster sampling, as opposed to students who write in their papers like, I just randomly went up to 10 houses. You know? Like, but if somebody says, I did cluster sampling, where I ensured that I had one house from this school district, one house from this block, and one house from this congressional district, or whatever clusters you want to use, that's going to give you a more valid, confident sample, as opposed to if you just go to a random block and ask all the houses on the block. Because like if I did this in Flint, I wish I had better maps to show you guys, because I've had better maps in the past in grad school classes where students presenting. It's nice. But in Flint, especially with the racial studies that I'm doing, like it's extremely segregated. And there'll be something like this, and so like if you went to this block, it would be all African American respondents. Most likely, maybe one Caucasian guy lives on that block. So you have to really look at the map first of Flint and see where all the people are living so that you can map out so you can get a very representative sample of the city that you're studying. Because if I just went to this block that I'm familiar with in Flint and I start interviewing people, my response, my sample might be 99% African American, whereas Flint may be 75% African American, in which case my sample would not be representative of the population. So this cluster sampling is kind of a good idea if you're doing something like a mini census or something like that, if you're studying Flint or Saginaw as your population group. So now this is the one that I wanted to focus on as well for this course, as I do for all my intro courses, which is convenience sampling, because it's quite often used because it is literally what it says it is. It's a sample based on convenience. And the examples would be if you passed out a survey in this class. I think every semester so far I've had at least one student pass out a survey in class, at least every semester. So I kind of expect that out of at least somebody in this class. And you can do that next week. I mean, you could get actual data and results. Other ways are doing the Facebook sampling technique, or going to the mall or any other street corner or place around campus. And the basis of a convenience sample is really, again, don't make it complicated, it's convenient, right? Selected on the basis of availability, convenient availability. because they volunteered, or because they're easy to get to, or because the researcher, your personal judgment, says that they're representative of your population. And sometimes convenience samples are pretty weak, but if you talk about why you used it, that's the important part, not just using convenience sampling. Another one, actually, kind of forgot to put in my slideshow. I feel bad, I left it off of one day's class, would be snowball sampling, which generally gets attached to convenience sampling. So if you were going to do a convenient sampling of your friends on Facebook, and you got 30 people to respond to your survey, and you asked them to have their friends take it, or those are not your friends, or they're your second-tier friends, or whatever, that's a snowball sample. Because I like that terminology, because I think convenience sampling really sinks in what it is. It's convenient. You go to Facebook tonight and throw out your survey. And then snowball sampling is that your friends take the survey, they tell their friends to take it. Now you've got 20 people, they tell their friends, it gets exponential, it snowballs. Now all of a sudden you have 1,000 responses because you just started with 10 friends and you told them to tell their friends to tell their friends. So you started with a convenience sampling, your 10 Facebook friends, and then it snowballed into a bigger sample, which is then called snowball sampling. Okay? So what I would do with my studies on sports are, I know a couple guys, like a couple international players, a couple guys, 2 coaches, a couple high school guys, a couple college players, right? So I know just a smattering of players, and that's my convenient sample. So what I do is say, hey, guy that I just randomly know that plays basketball in Greece who's from Lansing, can you tell your 12 other players on your team to take my survey? I would have no connection to those guys, but because I conveniently knew one guy and he snowballed it to those 12 guys, then all of a sudden instead of 12 surveys, I have 144, 12 times 12. And that's a convenience and a snowball sample. So that's commonly used, especially in an intro class, and I use it. It is easy, but I don't have very much time. That's one of my limitations, or money, or access, or funding, which is money. But that's why I use it. And so if you use convenience and/or snowball sampling, and you explain it, especially in your limitations section, you'll have a very strong paper. The explanation is really the most vital piece. So if you want to get more practice, you can go to this website again. The link, if you want the link to the slides, I'll give it to you if I haven't posted it already. You go to this Washington Sociology website. They have a complete quiz with answers, and I just cherry-picked one of them. Do you have confidence in this sampling technique? So it says a total of 27,000 readers of Time magazine returned a questionnaire asking about their problems at work, and the survey found that 87% were happy with their jobs. Now, is that a good sample, or do you have confidence in it? Well, without even reading this, I'll say no, because first of all of my respondents are literate, okay? So if I'm talking about problems at work, I would expect people who are illiterate working at Walmart and McDonald's to have a lot of problems at work. But I'm assuming that none of those people are respondents for this survey questionnaire, of time, because these are Time magazine readers. So not only can they read Time magazine, which means they might be a certain socioeconomic status of respondents. So what this says basically is that even though you have a large sample size, like none of you are going to get 27,000 questionnaire responses, this could actually be weaker than your sample of 25. Because if your study is about a certain population and you really nail the representative sample, your study would be better and more valid, and I would have more confidence in your study than this study, even though it passed out 27,000 questionnaires through a magazine. So that's when, I always say, like, I really treat you guys like adults and like really smart people that you are. You're all geniuses. You just don't know it yet. I just want to open up that light and let you know that you'll see studies like in USA Today, they have very little confidence because they do this, because they're junk. But if you really take the time to think about your study and you make a more valid, confident sample, you'll have better studies than this. And then when you see one of these studies in a newspaper or a magazine or on TV, you'll have it in your head, like, look, I did a better study. I can talk to you about confidence intervals, and I can talk to you about validity of studies and sample and the convenience sampling
this was junk because of this. Like, you'll be able to pick that up. And that's very important because, I talk about the educated and uneducated voters, but you need to not only know the facts, but how people came to their facts. And this was a lot of your midterm was just because somebody publishes in a scholarly academic journal doesn't mean that it's the truth or that it's right. Like, there are people that are terrible researchers that get published, and it's your job to pick out the junk and, basically criticize it or critique it. It's really important. You can't just take things as fact and as truth. You have to try to negate things that you think are wrong. For so many years, we had gender stereotypes, we still do, glass ceilings, and of course we have racism and this and that. So those mindsets get perpetuated somehow until somebody stands up and says, look, that's wrong, and here's why. And I mean, not just in pop culture or not just in the community, but in actually academic work. There will be, you can find like really racist old academic journal articles like that was scientific back then, because science is not truth. So you have to find stuff that was what you think was wrong and kind of discredit it. I can't say disprove it because we don't prove or disprove anything in this class. We only support or negate it. So again, that got me off on a rant about this, which was a junky sample, and you can do better than that. So that's the end of the slideshow. Here's another website that you can go to look at how to write an abstract. I mentioned that earlier. And then if you go to this website, you bring up some abstracts, you should be able to pick out the sampling right within the abstract, which is a little hint to you that you need to include sampling within your abstract. And if you read the How to Write an Abstract website, you'll see that it's going to tell you to include mentions of prior lit, mention of method, mention of sample, and if it doesn't, it's a junky website. I'll cut the link. Mention of your data results, mention of why it's important, mention of the gaps that you fill, and sort of just mention the future, sort of the next step of the research on your topic. So, let's see, I'm going to pull one up here. Let's see. Just to show you what I mean. I know you all trust me. Show you how to do this, and you should do this in all 6 of your articles, and it'll show you how to write a good abstract. But there's a lot of good things about this first one. But you can pick out, sample's pretty easy to pick out because it's usually numeric, right? Make it easy for me, right? In numeric. Here it's 40 veterans living in San Jose, Sacramento, and Seattle. Now I'm going to tell you again how to take it from primary school level, elementary school level, to college level. If you write, that your sample is 40 veterans living in Saginaw, Flint, and Lansing, then you go on to your next sentence. You've only done half of the work. You see, if you just look at it, it's so great. Good writers are just fun. So they've interviewed these veterans living in San Jose, Sacramento, and Seattle. Well, why did they hit those cities? Because those are home to 3 of the top 5 largest Vietnamese American communities in the nation. So if I was doing research like I am on post-industrialized cities or urban youth playing sports in post-industrialized cities, I'm not going to study Davison or Fenton or Holly or Bloomfield Hills. I'm going to go to Saginaw, Flint, and Detroit. So again, there's interviews with 40 veterans living in these 3 cities. That's descriptive. Why did they choose those cities? Because those are home to the 3 of the top 5 largest Vietnamese American communities in the nation, which is the population whom they want to produce results for. So their sample is representative of the population that they want to study. And that's critical. It needs to be expressed very concretely and clearly in your abstract and in your sample section. So sample is one of those that it's an easy section, but you have to take some time and put some thought into it so you can take it from the basic description to the next level college thought. Again, if you came into college knowing everything already, you shouldn't even be here. So you just need to take what you already know, add a couple things to it, add a little seasoning, and come out, it's going to be a better dish, a better final meal.
So that's sampling. I did want to point out another thing about this particular abstract, which is these numbers that are either making it very clearly stated and I don't remember this one, but it's either going to be the elements or the hypotheses or the categorizations. So this is very common to see in a good, clear article. A lot of the best articles, and I think the sample final that I put up has it, is a set of 3 numbers. More often than not, I see small Roman numerals, so it'll be little I, little I, little I, little I, little I, little I. And you want to either clarify your hypotheses, your variables under your study, independent, your elements or your hypotheses, or your categorizations. I don't know if I already said one of those, but you're going to put those in the numerics right there, and that makes it really pop on the page. So here's a good abstract. There's more good abstracts. Tells you how to write a good abstract. If you read this link and you're still having trouble writing an abstract, go back and look at your 6 articles. If you're still having trouble, email me. Take the first few steps, though. You know, like if you send me a very generic, basic question, that's okay. I won't shoot it down, but I'll say, you know, do a little bit more on this, do a little bit more on that. Answer these questions for me, clarify this, clarify that, throw it back at me, I'll throw it back at you, and work out through the process. And I really love those emails. I've got many of them this semester, some from this class, and it's very productive. So I'm more than willing to look at your abstract, your sample. If you go home and write it tonight, you want to shoot me an email. I don't have class tomorrow, so I got extra 3 hours. If you do write your 9 papers, or if you do write certain sections and you want me to look at it, now's the time. I would expect by the end of this weekend that you do have 9 pages, that you go do your method or you produce your expected data and results by next week. And if you do that, the Dropbox has been open since the first day of class. You can upload your final paper even if in draft form at any time. The earlier you do that, the more likely it is that I'll get a chance to look at it, review it, and even grade it. So like if you did 8 pages, you upload them, tell me to look at it, I could look at it. Hey, who knows, maybe I give you a 70%, even with only 8 pages done, because they were perfect 8 pages. And then you know that you can kind of put that aside and move forward and write the last 4 pages because you got, you know, solid response on that. Or you upload it, I look at it and I go, that's total junk. You know, start over, do this, do that. That's better to know now than to, you know, 8 out of 12, that's 75% of your grade. So if you have junk, you want to know about it now, as opposed to turning it in the last day of class, in which case I open it up, I look at it, like some of the midterms, and I just go, this is just really bad. But when I grade finals, I only have like 2 days to submit grades, so there's no time to revise. The time to revise is now, so this is why you want to get this done now, turn it in. If it's junk, say do it over. With the midterms, there are some zeros. People just got to do it over. Work forward, you know, and move forward. But again, with the final, if you wait till the last minute, no chance for a revision. If you flop, flop. So I strongly encourage, get these 9 pages done, do your methods this weekend or produce your expected results if you're doing a proposal, and then write the last 2 pages only after next week, because your bibliography should be done. Right? You wrote a bibliography, you wrote a 6-source bibliography. That doesn't need to, if you got a perfect score, then that doesn't need to be changed whatsoever. A lot of people did mess up on the bibliography, but that should be done by now. I mean, that should be, at bare minimum, you should have 1/12 of your paper done. Oh, and last week, if you did the methods exercise, you should have 2/12 of your paper done. That should be the bare minimum. Come to every class, you're going to have at least a 1/6 of your paper done. So that's what I have on sampling. Does anyone have any more questions on sampling? Any more questions? Have we had any questions? Anyone have any question on sampling? It's probably the most, that and limitations, probably the easiest sections to write. But the why is very important in sampling. Can't express that enough. And also using vocabulary terms. If you write convenience sample in your sample section, that was your sampling technique. That's a lot better than just saying, I interviewed 20 people. You've got to start using the terms. You know, I don't do tests for a reason, because I feel that you absorb the vocabulary and you can reproduce it when
necessary that I don't have to test you on? What does simple, whatever stuff that I just don't want to ask you what that is. I don't know half the time what it is. I just want to only focus on my research. So I could give you the option to only do what you want to do for 12 pages. So what we have to do to end class tonight is have your midterms up here. Okay? I want you to pick up your midterm. It's very important to listen to because apparently some students did not hear this, even in this class last week, or my last one. You got to pick this up. This is different than last week, but it's what I need today. So if this was yours, pick it up. Rip off the front page. You check sample limitations workshop, because we didn't talk too much about limitations. And then you give me back this page. So when I take it back to, and you can take your midterm home with you, has your comments and everything on it. And in some of your midterms, when I graded them, I said, make sure you really look at the peer comments because, just to overstate it, some people give themselves a 100%, their peer reviewer giving them 40%. I kind of split the difference maybe, but say you need to have a realistic perception of what's going on. Some people graded themselves too harshly too. I kind of have to cut it. But anyways, take your midterm, rip this off, check the box, and then put it again here. So when I take them back to my office, I know that you participated tonight, so that I don't send you an email that says you never come to class, and then you send me a hate mail back that says I do too, you jerk. And I'm like, I videotaped it. I don't have face recognition on this stuff. Again, turn this in, take this. If you have to talk to me, please do. I have a couple copies of the checklist up here. If you've never been to class, you can have a new checklist and fill it out. But other than that, stay after if you need to. Enjoy the holiday. Go Lions. Michigan State's playing right now. I'll be at the game on Friday and Sunday if you want to come say hello. I'll be wearing my green pants.
No, that's fine.
Yes. Oh, okay. Just sent me. Yeah, today, right? No, you sent me a new email about today.
Yeah, I sent you a new one.
Yeah, oh, it's Marcus, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And turn in.
Was it midterm?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I know I missed it. So.
Well, we can work through that. We can progress through that. Don't leave it as is. I'll just tell you what the basic mistakes are. What I want you to do, though, instead of upload it to VSpace. Okay. And we'll open up VSpace for another student. I think for 2 more days. So you can go home tonight, upload it to VSpace, because I don't like stuff like that.
Oh, thanks.
Yes. Everything up there. And I'll take a look at it. In fact, it'll go to me and says, hey, Marcus uploaded to VSpace. And I'll look at it and upgrade it and feedback. You guys are very kind. You want to do this, then you can submit. Yeah, no problem. Okay. Quotations, yeah. So go through it. In every place that there's a quotation, put quotation marks. Very important. Yeah, very common mistake. I mean, it's very common. I get it all the time. It's just a learning experience. So go through and do that. That helps me. Basically, what it does is it helps me to see your voice and their voice, and very clearly do that. And lets me know when to paraphrase. Also, too, if you want to take another revision, if you find that you're using too many direct quotes, keyword paraphrasing. Because I actually feel common on a lot of students that have these huge block quotes with quotation marks. It's like half a page is block quotes. Okay. Upload it to VSpace should be open for at least 2 more days. I think. You did your checklist, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a while, but Okay.
One and done.
What's the
Yeah,
font
it
is for that? I hope.
Pretty much the same as cover page, abstract, intro, lit review.
The method is like half a page.
Yeah. Limitations,
That
yeah.
has like methods of full page, samples of it.
Yeah, I forgot to put limitations up there.
So if you want like method half page, sample half page, and like this full.
These ones are generally about 2/3 of the page, but it really varies. So, I mean, that's why I say 10 to 12, and students are like, well, what's 10, what's 12? I'm like, it really varies. I mean, what you just want to watch out for is sometimes people will do me like a 2-sentence sample section. I'm like, seriously? Come on. So it should be at least like half a page or 2/3 is really good for that 2/3.
Okay, so like, is this good enough for this?
Yeah, that looks good. Yeah. I mean, the content's important, obviously, but yeah, that looks good.
Okay, so I can just send you. Go ahead.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely, please do. And also look at the sample final because she got an A.
Yeah, I took that and I'm just like,
Oh yeah. Her lit review is actually longer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you see it varies, and she got an A. So even with that variety, it's still okay.
okay.
Just don't give me a 2-sentence sample
Okay.
section. Oh gosh. Some people do that.
Is it a way to?
No, a lot of people are revising the midterm. You just need to make sure you revise it, upload it to VSpace. I think VSpace is open for 2 more days.
Okay.
I mean, I could extend it longer, but I think right now it's open for 2 more days.
Okay.
Revise it, upload it. Send me a note about what you did too.
Okay.
Just kind of discrepancy.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, please say.
Okay. These might be a lot like these are direct. You need quotations. Very important. And they need proper citations. Direct.
So how do you cite them? If I cited them one time, I told, there I said, I can understand how I did.
Mhm.
So either I do it or
It needs a quotation.
Quotation mark and you have to put probably there.
Yes, yes. It's very important because otherwise, this looks like, and this, yes, and that's exactly what it looks like in this class. And that's why that's that gamut of plagiarism. A lot of times it's unintentional, but it's extremely important. And look at the sample final. Look at some of the journal articles. But if you copy paste,
Yeah.
which is okay, it's so important. You need that and then blah 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 blah. That and then Smith 2010. So it's so important. So that I see that and I go, that's okay. That's an okay copy and paste. But if there's ever none of these or this, either and or, because like what Ken was just in here, he was including this, but he forgot these. So
So even that would be right.
yes, because without these, that's paraphrasing. And that's still a citation. It's like if somebody says, murder's really high in, industrial cities, and you go, I'm going to paraphrase it. I'm going to say that because of segregation in cities like Detroit, murder is high, which is a total reconstruction. I would still cite it, but I reworded it so I wouldn't need the quotation.
Okay.
But if you literally copy paste, you go so much in this.
Okay.
It's like
So what did you want me to do then?
revise it, do it right,
Okay.
and then resubmit it.
Everything else, I could fix everything I did wrong also.
Yeah. So what I was telling Ken, I wish I knew his first name. Yeah, that's Ken. Is that he had a lot of non-quotation mark citations. So what I told him was, if he starts putting quotation marks around stuff, like he's going to go do, he finds that there's way too many quotation sources to start paraphrasing and rewording, because like I'll say to a lot of other students is they'll throw in huge long block quotes, like half a page. I'm like, it's way too much. Like you should only have maybe 5 to 10% of your page should even be quoted and stuff.
So these can stay as long as I do it the right way. Right?
Yes. It's
Well,
true. Yes. Everything has to be
Alright.
so cited properly.
And then another thing was the tendency you were talking about. You would show us a check sheet or something. Was
Yeah.
that it? Oh, then I already did that.
Yeah, did you did a checklist and it's all.
This one, right?
No, it'd be the front page.
Oh, yeah, I put that over there.
Yeah.
Do we have to do anything to it?
You put an X on this week, which is the 4th checkbox. And then make sure I have it, because when I'm
So right
going,
there?
yeah, when I'm going through stuff, I'm looking at it and going, okay, Kayla was here, it's Kayla.
Yeah.
Be like, she was here for this sample or this and that methods. And that really helps me
Oh,
too.
and that was last week.
Yeah, there's a last week
Okay,
checkbox.
that, yeah. Okay.
That really helps me, like, if you send me an email, like, because so many students will be like, what sample? And I'm like, I just talked about it for an hour, what did you not get?
Okay,
It helps me.
thank you.
Got extra fun today. Extra.
So who's next?
Sure. Okay, so this sentence, or like the two or whatever, I didn't even want to put them in.
Okay.
I don't know why they were in there, but, so should I just go through and just take them out and just redo the first thing?
Yeah, you just have to make it right. Do you know what's wrong with it?
Yeah,
So make sure you fix it.
because it was like from here to, I don't know, like here that I didn't even want it. Because I didn't get it, so why should I put something in
Yeah. As long as you know what you can do to fix it. That's
Was that something that was bad too?
the parts that are certain.
Okay,
I can show you.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah, be very careful and stuff. You just gotta fix it. Move forward. Got it? You know how to fix it?
Yeah.
Alright. Because I want to make sure everybody's clear tonight.
I have a one, like, real quick. Okay, so
You know the writing center thing?
Yes.
since we have time to do this anyways, could I still go there, or is it too late for that?
No, that's actually good. I want you.
So I
because-
can retake this there so I can get those points.
Well, that's not actually points.
Oh, okay.
I would actually, here's the thing too, with everybody, actually, I should have told everybody this. I forgot, but who's revising? What you should do is, don't submit the midterm as a midterm. We're way far past it now. Your midterm, the reason why I have you do it is to get ready to write the lit review. At this point, you should be writing the lit review. So when you go to the writing center, don't take the old 2 months ago midterm instructions and say, how do I pass this midterm? Say, we did this midterm, and I'm supposed to turn it into a literature review. Help me do that. And then take that step forward, and then submit that.
Alright.
Okay?
Yep.
Forward.
So you don't want us to just like resubmit all these pages?
You can do whatever you want.
Oh, okay.
You can do whatever you want, but I'm just saying, like, progressively, at this point, we should be taking the midterm, moving into lit review.
Mhm.
So if you're going to the writing center, like Sanashi is, don't look backwards, look forwards, and take it to them and go, this is steps I want to take. I want to go this way. And you don't want to go that way. Does that make sense?
Mhm. So if I turn this in, is there a good chance like my 0 won't be a 0?
I don't remember. Well, yeah, it won't be
Well-
0, but I didn't read the rest of it. I don't think I stopped.
Oh, okay.
So, anytime I find that, just stop.
Oh, okay. Alright.
I have one method I could do, most of it could
Okay.
so just break this all down and for the review for the final.
Yeah, move towards a literature review.
Okay.
Did you read the comments that I posted on these things?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
That's my question. It's been a rough couple of weeks, so.
That's interesting because that's never happened to anyone, but it happened to another student in my Monday class. His computer was stolen.
Yeah, my freshman year, my computer crashed at the end of the semester and I had a big project. And I've just been having problems with my computer lately, so.
So he was like, he's my understanding. And actually, what happened to me on Flint too, believe this or not, my best student in Flint had her house lit up by a Russian and we shot it over 45 times. And it was my best student. So
Yeah.
that happens. But what I recommend, if it's crashing, what's the problem? Do you have a Gmail?
No.
Well, you can sign up for Gmail, it's free.
Mhm.
Or you can use the V Drive, whatever they call it. Use those tools.
Yeah.
Because like everything I do, I use Google Drive for my presentations, my PowerPoints.
Mhm.
I never use a hard drive. People at work are like, what? I'm like, I can walk by and kick your computer over and it'll be broke in my office. Like, spill coffee on it. Everything is just 20 years of work. You gotta store stuff in the cloud, so I'd highly recommend.
Yeah, I'm starting to store everything on my flash drive.
Yeah, that's one thing, but those things are great too. Even those external hard drives, I have huge terabyte hard drives at home. Any day, those things could just stop working.
Yeah.
You gotta back it up. It's good.
Like, I when I did this, and like, I stayed up like all night writing it before that someone got to do this. I even went to like McDonald's because their friend didn't have Wi-Fi. So I went to McDonald's and finished writing and sent it. So I'm like, I was figuring out about it.
Well, figure out, be preventative for next next semester. Just like walking in. That's computer room crash. I use Google Drive. I use Dropbox. There's other ones too.
Okay.
Google Drive, Dropbox, and whatever this new drive is. I like this school stuff.
I don't like the schools that I'm at. Thank you.
Yep.
Hi.
Hey, I should stop this. We're still on.
It's
The world is broadcasting.
turn on that girl.
Yeah, I restarted and it was pretty good. Did you get my email?
Is there one you should know?
Huh?
Is there one you should know or to our email?
Nobody in this area.
Right.
I sent one right before I left work. You know, I work in Port Huron.
So 5 o'clock. I have a new fun thing where here at my website, johngirdwood.com/stream, to make it as easy as possible, to remember. There it is. It's a little delayed. Intentional. An uneducated student who does not know what they're doing, to completely intentional, a student who knows exactly what they're doing and submits a fully copied paper. So this would be the gamut. And so because there is such a wide gamut and wide variety, we have to approach it with our best judgment. I don't like to be a judge. One of the reasons I dropped out of law school is because I don't like to judge things. But it's always fair, obviously. And in one of my classes this semester, I had a student copy an abstract and paste it and turn it in as one of the pages of the midterm. The entire page was the abstract. It's quite easy to see that. And I had a discussion with that student who didn't know what they were doing. And so we moved forward, and student resubmitted the work and revised it, and that was good. That tends to be what happens. At SVSU, there are two main paths for plagiarism. One is an informal, which is much like that. Talk with me tonight after class. Revise the work, resubmit it. If you were, I don't want to say caught plagiarizing because that's a negative connotation, but if you plagiarize, then a lot delayed, maybe? Whoa. Okay. Yeah. So I figured for everyone that couldn't make it tonight, they could stream it. I think I could probably see how many people were watching it. Let me see. I don't know if it says, but I could probably figure it out. Any guesses? Zero. My girlfriend watched the last one. It's one. But I think that's cool. Each semester I've taken steps forward trying to make the whole experience better for you. My first semester I had some guest lecturers. I had Sylvia Crawford guest lecture. She's a mother of NBA player. The NBA player who's famous for dunking on LeBron James in a summer league game. Her sons are from Detroit. She's from Detroit. I had, my next semester, I had Michael Moore Skype in. And this semester, I videotaped my lectures to put on YouTube in case anyone couldn't make it. And halfway through, figure out how to stream it. So, making progress. Wonderful. Had some great ideas. I get excited about this stuff, so I had some great ideas for next semester about what I want to do. But there it is. Here for the world to see. I don't know how good the clarity is, but I guess the sound is okay. Okay, so I got to switch off this website so I won't break the space-time continuum when I put this around here. Let's see. I think actually back farther. It worked pretty well. This is only the second time I've done it. Okay, so two things to start off with tonight, not to be a downer, and then we'll get to the material, the content of the lesson for tonight. But I had quite a few incidents this semester in all of my classes of plagiarism, and what that does is it bums me out, and it creates a lot of extra work, which is unfortunate, and a lot of extra work. So I just wanted to remind you the guidelines and the consequences and the processes for plagiarism. There is a wide variety of instances or types of plagiarism that stray from
completely unintentional.